I floored the gas pedal and sped under the yellow traffic light just as it blinked to red. As I cleared the intersection, I glanced in the rearview mirror to check if the green car was still on my tail. In the distance, I saw cross-traffic begin to move, momentarily blocking the path behind me. My heart was pounding, but I tried to keep focused. This all happened in the fall of 1993 when I was just 20 years old. For some context, this was during a transitional phase in my life, right before I started college. At the time, I had a night shift job in the material prep department of a plastics factory. I was the only woman working in that department, and though my male coworkers were skeptical at first about whether I could handle the physical demands of the job, I worked hard and eventually earned their respect. It was grueling labor, sure, but it had its upsides. I was in the best shape of my life. It was also a time of personal upheaval. Not long before this incident, I broke things off with my abusive boyfriend. He'd been verbally, emotionally, and physically abusive, not to mention an alcoholic. Looking back, I think my experiences with him probably led me straight into this new mess. The vulnerability he instilled in me had subtly shaped my judgment in ways I didn't fully appreciate until later. That night started like any other. It was around 1:30 a.m. and I'd just finished my shift. Bone-tired and running on empty, in more ways than one, I stopped at a local gas station to refuel. As I filled my tank, a woman about my age approached me. She looked nervous, maybe even frightened, which immediately put me on edge. She explained that she had just come from her boyfriend's house after a fight and had walked to the gas station to use the payphone and call a friend for a ride. But on her way there, she said a car full of guys had driven up beside her and started catcalling and harassing her. They'd even threatened her, and she was too scared to use the phone or stick around to wait for help. She nodded toward a large light green car parked by the dumpsters on the edge of the lot. In the dim light, I could barely make out 2 or 3 shadowy figures inside. Something about her story set my instincts on fire. It ticked every box for danger, but on the surface she appeared clean, sober, and genuinely distressed. She wasn't disheveled or acting erratically, she just seemed scared out of her mind. Without giving it another thought, I told her to get in my car. I figured I could drive her home. Once we pulled out of the gas station onto nearly empty streets, this being a weeknight at that late hour, I asked where she lived so I could get her home faster. But she seemed distracted, constantly twisting around in her seat to peer out the back window. "Could you put your seatbelt on?" I asked. She didn't answer, didn't comply either. She just kept fidgeting in her seat and scanning for something I couldn't see. At first, I chalked it up to fear. Those guys in the green car must have really terrified her. But my confusion mounted when, after several moments of silence, she suddenly turned to face me and asked flatly, "Where's your purse? Your bag? Do you have money? I need some." A wave of dread crawled up my spine. My stomach churned as I realized this might all have been a setup. Was she planning to rob me? If so, she couldn't have picked a worse target. My beat-up 1985 Chevy Chevette, affectionately nicknamed Shitbox, and my scruffy work clothes, worn jeans and a ratty t-shirt with combat boots, made it obvious that I wasn't exactly rolling in cash. Still, I stayed quiet and kept driving, trying to process what was actually happening. Before I could fully collect my thoughts, she whipped her head around again and screamed with excitement this time, "There they are! There they are!" Her fear evaporated instantly, replaced by giddy delight. Sure enough, in my rearview mirror, I saw the light green car from earlier right behind us. My stomach dropped as she started gleefully bouncing in her seat like some unhinged child on Christmas morning. "My boys are gonna mess you up. You're done," she cackled loudly before rummaging frantically through my glove box and poking around behind her seat as if searching for something. My panic turned into sharp anger as everything clicked into place. This had been a setup from the start. A vivid anger painted over my fear as 3 critical things registered all at once. An intersection loomed ahead with cars beginning. This is a harrowing and unsettling account that spans multiple events, each with intense emotions tied to them. To make everything clearer and easier to follow, I've reorganized the narrative, polished the tone for consistency, and ensured it respects the gravity of the situation while maintaining your original intent. I hadn't quite processed what was happening when it all escalated. Out of nowhere, this crazy woman started screaming at me. I slammed on the brakes and she was thrown forward, hitting the dashboard and windshield with a loud, bone-jarring crack. When she rebounded into the passenger seat, I instinctively grabbed a box cutter. I don't even remember everything I yelled. It was something along the lines of, "Get out of my car before I cut off your face and make you eat it." It was pure fear-fueled adrenaline talking, but it did the trick. She fumbled for the door handle, managing to pop it open in her panic. At that moment, I couldn't think straight. I just wanted her out of my car and away from me. I remember shoving and hitting her until she tumbled onto the curb. Without thinking, I stomped on the gas pedal and sped off. The passenger door was still wide open as I took the next turn, tires screeching. I kept turning and weaving through streets because my paranoia told me that she, or worse, someone in her green car, might try to follow me. Once I felt reasonably confident I'd lost them, I pulled over to shut the door. My hands were shaking so badly, and it felt as though my brain was in a fog. I eventually made my way across town and got onto the highway to head home. After maybe 5 minutes on the road, the shock started to settle in. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, so I pulled over onto the shoulder to try and calm myself down before continuing. When I finally got home, I told my sister everything. We'd been living together temporarily after my recent breakup with my ex, and telling her was both a relief and a reckoning. She pulled me into a tight hug while simultaneously yelling at me for not going to the police. Her anger oddly made me feel safe, like I could finally release all the overwhelming fear inside of me. Unfortunately, this wasn't my only terrifying experience in recent years. 2 years ago, I moved to the UK for university, a choice largely driven by my need to escape a toxic environment at home. My first year went well. I lived in student accommodations, made great friends, and met my boyfriend. We're still happily together. Life seemed promising for once. By the time my second year rolled around, some friends and I decided to rent a student house instead of living in yet another small shared flat. My room was on the ground floor with a window leading to a narrow backyard. This tiny space had a flimsy wooden gate that opened to an alley where we stored our bins and broken furniture. The door could only be locked from inside the yard, and over time it became so worn out that we had to use makeshift means to keep it shut. Our house had neighbors on either side, families in some homes and fellow students in others. On one side there were 5 guys who didn't seem like students at all. They appeared much older and, well off in general. Any doubts we had about them disappeared after an incident one evening. One night, we heard screams coming from their house and saw police cars outside when we looked out. Concerned but cautious, my flatmates and I went outside to see what was going on. We found one of our neighbors in a horrible state. He was bleeding heavily with cuts all over his arms and even a gash on his head from a knife wound. Apparently, one of his flatmates had attacked him and set their kitchen on fire before being arrested. As shaken as we were, we decided to help him clean up his wounds before the paramedics arrived. We gave him an old shirt to change into because his was soaked in blood. But even as we tried to help him, he kept making inappropriate comments toward me, trying to grab at me or flirt with me like it was no big deal. We also noticed he reeked of weed, not just a little but enough to be overwhelming. After that night, I wanted nothing more to do with him or anyone else from that house, but I'd sometimes see him on my way to or from uni. We never spoke, though, at least not until one day when he caught me on my way to the corner shop. He approached me out of nowhere and started talking in this unsettling and weirdly familiar way that instantly put me on edge. I don't know why it made me so uncomfortable. Maybe it was the memory of that first encounter or just something about his demeanor, but every nerve in my body screamed for me to stay away. So I didn't. He replied hesitantly, that's okay. I'll just wait in front of your house and we can talk more then. That statement sent chills down my spine. I tried to brush it off as a joke, though deep down I felt uneasy. After grabbing my drink from the shop, I headed back home, but as I turned onto my street, my worst fears were realized. He was there, sitting on the doorstep with his flatmate, waiting for me. Panic surged through me and I quickly retreated to the corner shop. Desperate, I called my only male flatmate, asking him to take care of the situation. Unfortunately, he wasn't home, nor was anyone else. With no other options, I stayed at the shop for over an hour until they finally left. Once the coast was clear, I ran back home and locked the front door tightly. Our door had a glass panel that partially revealed who was standing outside, which made things feel even more unsafe. This unsettling encounter motivated me to avoid the guy as much as possible, and for a while I succeeded. But then something else strange happened. One day while smoking in the backyard, I noticed the wooden storage door that was always tied shut had been left open, with the string used to secure it cut cleanly off. Though this should have alarmed me more than it did, I brushed it off as one of my flatmates being careless after taking out the trash. I retied the door with a new string and moved on as if it were nothing. Meanwhile, our neighbors, the same ones known for creating havoc by screaming, yelling, and fighting late into the night, became another source of unease. They would often rouse my flatmates and me from our sleep with their disturbances. Over time, we tried to ignore it and adapt to the chaos around us. One night, my boyfriend was staying over like he often did. He was usually a heavy sleeper who could rest through anything, but that night was different. A loud bang followed by faint whispers woke him up, and then he woke me. Silence hung heavy in the air as we both lay frozen in bed and strained to hear if more noises would follow. Suddenly, we heard the sound of that same wooden backyard door bursting open, then footsteps approaching my bedroom window. My heart stopped as I realized the window was already ajar due to how warm it had been earlier in the day. We stayed perfectly still as we heard someone shaking the backyard door softly, seemingly testing its lock. As much as they moved around outside, they couldn't see us through the curtains. But the danger felt palpable, blood rushed in my ears and even breathing seemed risky. Then we heard whispering in a language we couldn't understand as they started trying to force their way into my room through the window. My boyfriend and I leapt into action, grabbing our phones and clothes in record time before bolting out of the room and escaping the house altogether. Once outside, panic took control. I managed to call my flatmates, urgently instructing them to lock their bedroom doors while I simultaneously contacted the police. Thankfully, the police arrived astonishingly fast, within 5 minutes, as their station was just a few streets away. What followed is mostly a blur due to shock, but I recall they apprehended one of the men near our house while the other fled to a nearby street. The second man was eventually found smoking weed only blocks away. The police raided their house and made terrifying discoveries: massive quantities of meth and heroin and a large kitchen knife they carried with clear harmful intent. It became apparent that their intentions were far darker than we'd imagined. One of them was sentenced to 2 years in prison for possessing a weapon with intent to harm. The entire ordeal left me feeling shaken and deeply confused. I couldn't understand what would drive them to target me. I hadn't done anything to provoke them or incite their actions. The trauma lingered long after I'd moved home several months later. Wondering what could have happened if my boyfriend hadn't woken up kept me up at night. Now, even small noises jolt me awake, and vivid nightmares remind me of how close we came to danger. But amidst all this fear and uncertainty, one thing brings me solace: I'm still with my boyfriend. Despite everything, talking through that horrific night together has been cathartic and healing for both of us. While recalling this terrifying incident makes me reflect on the dark moments of my past, it also reminds me of another time in my life when I was drawn into an emotional whirlwind: my relationship with Tim during college. He was well known as a talented musician in our local community, and initially appeared loving, charismatic, attentive, everything that sparks an intense infatuation when you're young and naive. Tim would write me heartfelt mixtapes, cook meals he knew I'd love, and dedicate songs to me during open mic nights in private. His behavior started to unravel. He suffered from delusions, told compulsive lies, and began creating art fixated on themes of violence, rape, and murder. I was deeply worried and emotionally drained, but I tried to approach him with kindness, understanding, and unwavering support. I loved him and felt strongly that he shouldn't have to face his mental health struggles alone. Then came the day he disappeared. He was gone for an entire day without a word. When I went to his apartment, the lights were on, the front door stood wide open, and his phone sat untouched on the nightstand. Panicked, I took a few deep breaths and started calling around the city, spending hours trying to track him down. Eventually, I found out he had been involuntarily admitted to a mental hospital. I resolved to stay strong for him and visited every day during supervised visitation hours. I brought him his favorite books to keep him occupied and held him tightly when he cried, insisting it was all a mistake and that he didn't belong there. It was surreal to see someone I had known as gentle, intelligent, and kind-hearted sitting among residents of what seemed like a grim scene out of a horror movie, people suffering from long-term, severe psychiatric illnesses. In hindsight, it's odd that none of the staff ever explained why he was admitted, but at the time I was too polite and naive to ask. Our relationship ended a few months later, though not in the way I'd imagined. I found solid evidence that he was cheating on me. While hurt and angry, a part of me felt relief. When I confronted him about it, I told him to pack his things and leave my apartment for good. That's when something inside him snapped. The man I had loved was gone in an instant, replaced by someone I barely recognized, cold and menacing with wild animalistic eyes. He threatened to kill someone if I didn't take him back. But by then I had reached my breaking point. Enough was enough. I called the police. Although they weren't particularly helpful, Tim left. I blocked him on every platform and cut off all contact, but he wasn't done. For weeks, he left unsettling voicemails from different numbers, pleading, ranting, or threatening to no avail. Fortunately, I managed to stay relatively composed through it all. Slowly but surely, life returned to normal. I graduated college and landed a great job in the same city. It wasn't long before that shred of normalcy unraveled too. 6 months later, I woke up to a barrage of worried texts from mutual friends warning me that Tim had gone off his medication again. He was clearly spiraling and had turned to social media for an outlet. His posts were riddled with manic ramblings, including a new song he'd written, one that immediately caught everyone's attention. His former best friend, who hadn't spoken to me since before our breakup, sent me an apology along with a screenshot of the song's lyrics. The song wasn't subtle, it was about me. More specifically, it depicted my assault and murder in a thinly veiled yet creatively disguised way. We're still? The song was hauntingly catchy. Curiosity got the better of me and I checked his social media accounts from a friend's profile. The posts were unhinged. Dozens upon dozens of statuses bouncing between gushing love letters about me and dark, violent imagery of revenge. Some of his friends expressed concern in the comments. Others seemed to think he was merely venting or joking, even egging him on. I decided not to engage and chose instead to document everything for my own safety. A few days later at work, as I sat at my desk deep in thought, everything crashed down around me. Out of nowhere I looked up, and there he was. Tim stood across the studio talking calmly with my creative director as if nothing had happened between us. My entire body froze. Dread washed over me like ice water as I watched him casually scan the room for me. Without thinking, I bolted for my project manager's office and slammed the door behind me. Words poured out in an incoherent flood as I tried to explain everything through uncontrollable trembling. Thankfully Nancy, bless her, was incredible. She kept her composure and seemed to understand what was happening almost immediately. Taking charge, she snuck me out of the building through a side entrance and drove me directly to the police station. There, I showed the officers every screenshot I'd gathered and filed a formal report. My coworkers later filled in some alarming details. Tim had come in applying for an open designer position, despite having no qualifications in design, and presented a supposedly impressive portfolio alongside an entirely fabricated resume. During the interview he mentioned me, casually asking if I still worked there and mentioning how we used to collaborate. As if that wasn't chilling enough, that phrase still gives me chills. After saying it, he left and somehow located my abandoned car in the parking lot. He paced behind it relentlessly until the police arrived. Unfortunately, his behavior wasn't deemed threatening enough for the cops to take him into custody that day. However, that encounter provided the evidence I needed to secure a restraining order against him. My company was incredibly supportive throughout this ordeal. I felt deeply ashamed that my unhinged ex had shown up at the studio, but the CEO took immediate action by filing trespassing charges against him. They even developed a detailed safety plan to ensure I was protected if he ever returned. Not long after this incident, I decided to move to another city and leave the chaos behind. Since then I've heard nothing from him. What truly disturbed me came later. His former roommate at the time, Liz, shared her own chilling experience with him during his breakdown. When we pieced together our timelines, she revealed that she had seen a large axe in his car in the same week everything came to a head. Concerned about his increasingly erratic behavior and alarming posts on Facebook, she secretly removed the axe and hid it. When Tim discovered it missing, he flew into a rage and destroyed their house before storming out, never returning. If our calculations are correct, this meltdown occurred just before he appeared at my workplace for his interview. Fast forward to a few days ago, and I now find myself shaken by an unsettling experience of my own. At just 17 years old, I worked the second shift at my local movie theater, which became the stage for another creepy encounter. It started on a Friday night while I was enjoying my weekend downtime on Xbox Live playing Overwatch and indulging in cold pizza. I was doing remarkably well in the game, dominating more than usual and earning on fire status for 3 matches in a row, a sign of exceptional performance. Around 2 a.m., feeling confident, I decided to try competitive mode and joined a match on King's Row. Playing as Pharah in defense, I racked up a 15-player kill streak, repeatedly taking out the same player named A. Bastion. After taking him down for the 6th time, I received a party invite from him. Curious but guarded, I joined the party, half expecting the usual trash talk from a kid not much younger than me. To my surprise, it was a grown man speaking on the other end of the microphone, likely in his 30s, with a thick Spanish accent. Right from the start, he launched into an expletive-filled tirade against me. While I expected some level of hostility after beating him multiple times in the game, I wasn't prepared for this intensity. I kept my cool and brushed off his rant with a typical response, "Oh, you mad bro?" What followed was even more unhinged than I could have imagined. He began hurling grotesquely violent threats, declaring he'd hurt my family in unspeakable ways, and for a moment I was stunned. Still, I managed to keep it together and told him to take a chill pill. At that moment, his Bastion hero was killed again by one of my teammates playing D.Va, and that's when things spiraled into total chaos. His reaction was beyond what I'd ever experienced. He started making guttural, beast-like noises through his microphone. It sounded as if he were growling, screaming, spitting, and choking simultaneously. The guttural sounds were more akin to an enraged animal than an adult human being. It wasn't amusing like when preteens lose their cool on live chat, it was downright terrifying. The match ended swiftly, our opponents couldn't even get their payload moving, and this unhinged man's fury only escalated over his loss. As he continued to spew rage, I decided to poke the bear one last time. Look man, it's not my fault you suck at this game. If you can't handle losing like an adult, you shouldn't expect anyone else to treat you like one. My remark set him off further. He screamed, F******** you, into his mic with such deafening volume that the microphone distorted for nearly 20 seconds before cutting out completely. The noise gave way to static as if his sheer anger had broken his equipment. Without another word he kicked me out of the party. Feeling rattled but thinking it was over, I decided to log out and call it a night since the match had ended and my friends had long since logged off. As I lay in bed decompressing from the bizarre exchange, it hit me, I should have recorded it. My friends would have found the whole thing hilariously absurd. But by then it was too late, so I shrugged it off and went to sleep. By Saturday nothing out of the ordinary happened and I figured it was Sunday came after Saturday, and that morning I logged onto my Xbox to get in some Overwatch. As soon as I logged in, I noticed a new message from a guy whose name I vaguely recognized. It said, "Good morning," followed by my full name and added, "I know you have to go to, insert the address of the movie theater where I work, tomorrow." My mind froze. What the heck? I said to myself, staring at the screen. Trying to stay calm, I grabbed my phone and snapped a picture of the message displayed on the TV screen. Concerned, I immediately texted my boss, explaining that someone on Xbox had somehow figured out where I worked. Now, context. My boss is this eccentric older woman who tends to shrug off just about everything. True to form, she brushed it off like it was no big deal and told me I still had to come into work the next day. Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom and The Incredibles 2 are both huge right now, she reminded me. It's going to be busy. So, the next evening I clocked in for my shift at the theater around 5:30. It was as hectic as expected, crowds everywhere, constant noise, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary until about 8 p.m. That's when he showed up. I noticed him the moment he walked through the doors. He was really short, and despite the buzz of the crowd, I heard him shout my name across the lobby in a thick Spanish accent, the same voice from Xbox. My chest tightened and all I could think was, how did he find me? Why is he here? Panic set in. Unsure of what to do, I rushed to the back room where my boss was stationed. I told her right away that the guy from Xbox was inside the building. True to character, she didn't seem to understand the gravity of the situation. "I don't care about what happens to you online," she said dismissively. "We're busy. Get back to work." But I wasn't just going to let this go. I told her again, he was here in person, right outside those doors, and I had no idea what his intentions were. For all I knew, he might want to harm me. I told her I was going to call the cops. With my phone in hand and hands trembling, I dialed 911 and explained the situation. When the police arrived, they took me aside to a private area in the back room. Finally, my boss started taking me seriously. The officers talked with the guy in the lobby and ultimately put him in handcuffs before escorting him out. My boss told me about it later because I stayed in the back, too shaken to step out and witness it myself. As of today, I still haven't gotten updates from the police. I have no idea how this guy managed to dig up my personal info or why he went out of his way to show up at my workplace. Most unsettling is not knowing what he had planned or if he even knows where else to find me, like my home address. I'm still on edge over the whole ordeal. While part of me takes some comfort in having two dogs that would definitely intimidate any intruder, I can't shake this sense of anxiety that has me perpetually looking over my shoulder. The thought of running into that man again is something I can't stop worrying about.